Where are we and what's the significance behind this relic behind you?
And we are recording this video at Saint Nectarios Shrine in West Covina, California. Before I start talking about Saint Nectarios, the term here is this is not just a church, it's a shrine. It's open every day of the week as far as I know, at least during the weekdays. You can check the schedule, but it's open to the public, and most churches are not, but this one is, and it's one of 3 shrines in the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese, at least what the priest who serves here told me. The other 2 are St. Nicholas on Ground Zero, where the Twin Towers used to be, St. Nicholas Shrine. And the third one is St. Photius Shrine in Florida. And those are shrines, national shrines in the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese for other reasons other than spiritual ones, let's say, because of political or other things that happen there. But this particular shrine, it is known for the relic, which is behind me, of Saint Nectarios. Saint Nectarios was, he's one of 2 of the most celebrated and popular saints in modern Greece. And there have been many modern saints in Greece. The 2 most popular and well-known by far are Saint Nectarios and Saint Paisios. Saint Paisios is gaining some traction, but Saint Paisios is not known for the same things that Saint Nectarios is known for. First of all, if anybody's watching and they want to learn more about Saint Nectarios, I would say an excellent place to begin is there's several documentaries online about him, but there's also a beautiful movie that was made called Man of God. And I like the movie. It has its flaws because it's obviously it's a cinematic reproduction of his life, and it's not going to be totally perfect. But it's a very good representation. It's based on his life very, very closely, and it's a wonderful, wonderful movie that gives you a sense of who Saint Nectarios was. And if you're like me and you don't like reading books, you prefer to watch movies, then you could watch the movie Man of God. But Saint Nectarios, this is a kind of a personal discussion for me to have because I love Saint Nectarios very much. And I wasn't close to him earlier on in my spiritual life. I always liked him, but I've grown close to him, especially very recently. In fact, this church here where we're at, it was St. Nectarios' feast day a week and a half ago. Today's November 18th, and the Sunday before last, they celebrated his feast day. That's why there's flowers around the icons. They're going to remove them today, actually, after we're done. The bishop was here. I came here for the Vespers, and I'm not the only one to come here. I want to say that before I start talking about St. Nectarios is that this shrine has attracted thousands of people, tens of thousands of people. Saint Nectarios is not like the other saints. All the saints are unique. The thing that makes Saint Nectarios unique, really, that stand out amongst the saints of the Orthodox Church, the modern saints, is that he's called a thaumaturgos, a wonder worker. He does so many miracles through his prayers, and people are healed of cancer. Women who are barren can have children. They become fertile. I'm going to mention a few of these examples later on, but this shrine, it doesn't have a lot of people here who attend this church. It's a really small community, but there are so many people that come here just because of Saint Nectarios and because they're asking him for help. And he does miracles for many of them. Many of them, I want to say here, are not even Orthodox. It reminds me, I think there's a similar story here, because I was when I was at the seminary, we took senior trips to Constantinople, and we went to the Prince's Island, and at the top of one of the Prince's Islands, there's a monastery to St. George, the wonder worker, the trophy bearer, we say, the great martyr. And he's also a very powerful miracle-working saint, one of the most powerful wonder-working saints we have. And I think the saints who suffered tremendously have the ability to do miracles because, I just want to say this, because after being tortured in many cases or going through the difficulties they did, I feel like they can approach Christ and ask him, and he's not going to deny them anything. And that's why their intercessions are so bold and so powerful. St. George was terribly tortured. And so now if he goes to Christ, is Christ going to say, oh, no, I'm sorry, George, I'm not going to do that for you? Of course not. He's not. He's going to do what he asks him because of what he did for Christ. And it's the same thing with someone like Saint Nectarios. But in any event, I'm reminded of this monastery of Saint George. And the monk who was taking care of it years ago was telling us that on his feast day of Saint George, hundreds and thousands of Turkish Muslims go to this monastery. And they climb all the way up this huge hill. It's like it's probably several hundred meters or yards in altitude. It's not an easy walk. And they climb up there. And he says they ask St. George for things. And they throw their hands in the air, and they don't know how to pray because they're Muslims. They don't know how. They don't make the sign of the cross or anything. And the monk said, but St. George answers them. And he does miracles for them. And they know that St. George is bad to the bad people and good to the good people. He's just. And if somebody has a real need, he helps them. And he gets justice for them against people that have done injustices against them. Well, Saint Nectarios has a similar thing going on here because many of the people who come to this shrine, again, are not Orthodox. In fact, one of the standout features of this particular shrine here in Southern California, and Jonathan can attest to this, is that there are hundreds and thousands of Armenian people who come here. And most of them belong to the Armenian Apostolic Church. One lady came here. The reason Jonathan knows this is because when we were filming earlier, several of these Armenian people came in and were talking about how Saint Nectarios saved their lives. And he did miracles for them. Right, Jonathan? And I would say that Saint Nectarios, like Saint George, he helps anybody who asks for his help. But the difference is that Saint George usually, I think, is more associated with justice and correcting injustices and this kind of thing. Saint Nectarios is much more of a healing saint. He helps people that have medical problems. He's very well known as a healer of medical problems. He had chronic prostatitis for the last years of his life, very painful, and he suffered a tremendous amount. And he eventually died, and because of his suffering, I think he sympathizes with people who have especially cancer. One of these Armenian ladies that I was talking to, I came here last Sunday at the Paraklesis to Saint Nectarios, and she said to me, I had colon cancer, and I come here all the time. I really love Saint Nectarios. She said I couldn't have babies first. I was barren, and I came here, and I asked Saint Nectarios for his help, and then I had children after that. And she said, now I have another problem. I have colon cancer, and I'm undergoing chemotherapy and other treatments. And I came here, and she said I had a dream, and Saint Nectarios, he in the dream he was there by my bed, and he kept going like this, shh, as he does in the movie, which maybe I'll get to later in this. But she said he picked her up and shook her a couple times in her dream. And he said, now you're cured. And in the dream, it was still part of her dream. She got up out of the bed. She was in a hospital, she said, and she went out to the halls and she said, I'm cured. I'm healed. I know it. And then she woke up. And then she said to me that she went to the hospital and had an MRI shortly after that, and the tumor was gone. It was gone. Another man that I met here, a Greek man who belongs to this parish, he had I should look this up exactly. He had an ear problem. I want to say it so that people don't think that I'm just making this stuff up. I saw him, and he was still had some of the effects from this. The condition he had is called bilateral sensorineural hearing loss in both ears. And he said enlarged vestibular aqueducts are both healed now, both ears. He lost his hearing one day when he was 20-something years old, young, and there was tremendous pain in his ears, and he couldn't hear. And anyways, he prayed. He kept coming to Saint Nectarios, and then he said that he went to Aegina, the island where Saint Nectarios was from, where most of his relics are, and he said that he was there, and he could sense this presence, the presence of holiness, the presence of Saint Nectarios petitioning Christ to heal him. And he said, I knew that Saint Nectarios was a healer. And it was Christ that was doing the healing, but Saint Nectarios was involved with my healing. And he told me that this problem has come back 2 times in his life, and that he's continued to pray to Saint Nectarios, and every time it goes away. Most people don't recover from this, he told me. Another woman who was here, it was a Jewish lady I met, and she had some problems in her life. She told me her story. She's a parishioner here now. She said that she came here. She had an Armenian friend of hers, another lady, and she told her, you should come and pray. And so she came and she prayed, and then she said she prayed about her problems. And shortly after that, I think it was her son's birthday, she said she went home, and her son came running into the room that night and said, there's a man in my room and with a beard, and he's dressed up. And she's like, you sleep with your sister. She thought they live in a very safe community, so she wasn't worried. She's like, what's he doing? And after this, she went, right after this happened, she told me that the problems that she had in her life were solved very quickly. And so she came back to the church, and she kept praying and wanted to thank him. And her husband, who's Jewish, she's, well, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. He said, no, I need to thank him. These problems went away, so I'm going to go back, she said. And then after this, she said that she went back home, and she was at home with her husband, and he was watching Letterman downstairs. She told me she went up to her room, and she lay down on her bed, and she had some kind of an out-of-body experience. And she said she went somewhere, and Saint Nectarios was anointing her somewhere. She said there were people around. He came up to me in this experience she had, and he anointed her. And she said, you're anointed now. You're one of us. Everything's going to be okay, he told her. And then after that happened, she had another dream in which she was going home, and it was in darkness in this dream. And she said that in the middle of this dream, when she couldn't find her way home and it was pitch black, she saw a cross. It was light, a very bright cross lifted up in the darkness. And at the top of this cross was Christ. And she said, by following this cross, I found my way home, and I got home, and then I woke up. And so she realized that this was all true, and Orthodoxy was true, and she joined the church because of these miracles that were happening through Saint Nectarios and other things. And then she told me that her daughter had cancer, and Saint Nectarios and Saint Nicholas, she told me, ended up healing her daughter from cancer. She was at UCLA under the best doctors, and they couldn't explain it. It may have been leukemia, but I'm not sure. And then one other story that I'll tell about this was that Saint Nectarios, he's done so many. Actually, I could tell a few more stories about his miracles. One of them was one that I know. There was my friends, I'm friends with 3 brothers. One of them I met at seminary, and he's a priest in Greece, one of the brothers, the one that I met first. And I was close to their family, and when I used to go, when I was at seminary to Greece, to the monasteries during the summertime, I used to stay at their house. And their grandmother was a very pious Greek lady from Asia Minor. She had come through the exchange of the populations. And she liked me a lot. And I used to go take her blessing when I was there and kiss her hand like a holy person. And the last years of her life, for 8.5 years to the end of her life, she was bedridden in their house. She couldn't get up. And I remember hearing when they would go and wash her, they would have to roll her over the nurses and attendants, and she would just be screaming in agony of the pain. Her toes ended up crossing each other. There's a condition, I don't know what it's called, when your toes cross each other because you can't walk for so long. I don't know. It's years that she was there suffering in that. And my friend's mom had to take care of her, and she said that, I heard this from his brother first, and then I talked to his mom just today about this, and she said, 40 days before she died, I went to go give her some food in the morning in her bed, and she said to me, who was that man in black who came in with two people, young men, one on each side in white robes, and they were sensing me in the house? Who were they? And she's like, "What?" She thought, "Well, she's on medication. She's not. She's not out of. There's nobody here." And she says, "Yeah, no, they were here." And she kept saying this every day, and for 40 days. And then she said, she kept telling her, "Can't you smell the incense? They just came here and sensed me. They just came here and sensed me." And she's like, "What she's talking about? There's nobody here. It's the same man dressed in black, with one man a young man looking figure on either side in white robes." And she said they would come and sense her every day. And on the 40th day, she passed away. I talked to my friend's mom about this, and she said, yeah, she used to pray the Paraklesis to Saint Nectarios every day for years. And so she thinks that it was Saint Nectarios that came to take her soul when the time came. Saint Nectarios has done incredible miracles. I mean, one of the things that he's done repeatedly is that if you go to his tomb in Egina and you put your ear to it, you'll hear knocking. And a man came there once, and he was a Protestant from Germany. And he put his ear there. He had heard about this. He was not believing, but he put his ear there, and he heard knocking the first time, and he thought it was a recording or something. Okay, they're playing a recording. What's going on? Knocking. Don't. And he left, and he came back sometime later, a year later, I don't know when, sometime later, and he put his ear there again, and instead of knocking, he heard Saint Nectarios speak to him, and he said to him, "You'll become Orthodox, and you'll become an Orthodox priest." And this man became an Orthodox Christian. He was a German Protestant, and he became an Orthodox priest. And as far as I know, to this day, he's still serving as a priest in Germany. There's another story people always talk about, how this is the last story I'll mention, and I want to say some things about the relic and miracles and faith. I'd like to talk about that. So another miracle that happened was that this was in an isolated village in Romania, and the people there, very isolated. They didn't have a priest to baptize their children, do the Holy Communion. They wanted to go to confession. They wanted all these basic, spiritual needs of theirs met, and they didn't have anybody. So they wrote to the bishop, and they said, "Please send us a priest." And the bishop said, "Look, I don't have anybody to send you. I can't help you." After a while, this priest came out of nowhere, and he started baptizing them. He started teaching them about the faith. He started baptizing their children. He did liturgy. He was there a month, and he did a whole bunch of stuff for them. And as he baptized them, he had to sign the baptismal certificate, so he signed it, and he was, after a month, he left, and they wrote back to the bishop, and they said, "Thank you so much for sending the priest to us. He was so nice. He did all these wonderful things for us." And the bishop was like, "A priest went there? I didn't send anybody." So they went there to investigate, and they started looking into it, and they got the documents from the baptisms of these children, and they looked at the signature, and it said Nectarios Ependopoulos, the saint. He'd signed it. I want to say a couple things just in case people hear these stories, and I don't want them to misunderstand. I want to just say, because there's a lot of inquirers, I think, who watch your channel. It is the Orthodox Church's teaching very clearly that saints don't actually do miracles. It is God that does the miracles. But he does them, as I was indicating earlier, at the petition of the saints, at the request of the saints, at the prayers of the saints. It is always the Holy Spirit that does the miracle, but God does these things because of his love and regard for us, and especially his holy ones. Miracles happen. We should also understand that, as St. John of Kronstadt says, God created the world the way that he did, and he put the laws of nature into action, into place, when he created the world, and he governs the world according to the laws that he himself established. So many times when we pray for things, God doesn't do a miracle because he doesn't need to do a miracle. He can answer our prayers using natural law, using the things that he himself put in place for and he has regard to. We should not ask for signs and miracles. This is what the Jewish leaders did to Christ. They put him on the spot. We should accept whatever answer God gives. But St. John of Kronstadt says, God does occasionally violate the laws of nature to show us that he is above them, that he controls them, and he can suspend them at any moment that he wants to. We absolutely believe in miracles in the church. And on top of that, we believe, as Orthodox Christians, that God's grace and holiness can be communicated to us through a material object. This can be seen in the Gospels when Christ is touched, the hem of his garment is touched by a woman with a flow of blood. She didn't touch him. She touched the hem of his garment, and power went forth through the garment and healed her. And in another place, St. Paul is walking, and there were so many people trying to see him that they held his handkerchief out, so that its shadow fell at least on some of them. And when it did, they were healed. Some paralytics got up and walked, I believe, if I remember right from the passage. And St. John Chrysostom says, if all the men of today got together, they couldn't do as much as the handkerchiefs of St. Paul once did. But whatever the case is, we believe that God can communicate his grace through a material object. I have seen with my own eyes, and I have smelt with my own nose, with my own body. I've touched holy icons and relics many times, and there is a fragrance around these objects, an otherworldly fragrance and an otherworldly sweetness that blows off of them, a spiritual fragrance, it's material too. And if anybody comes around these relics of these saints and they're close to them for any length of time, and they have faith, they have at least some measure of faith, some small measure of faith, they too will experience the grace of God. And they will experience God's healing energy come into them in their life. It will transform them. But again, Saint Nectarios, when he was alive, if a material object is going to communicate that to us, like a relic or like a piece of the Holy Cross or even Holy Communion for some people, if that's an icon, a holy icon, if something's going to communicate to us the divine energy and to heal us, it presupposes that a person is praying and approaching that with faith. Faith is extremely important. Without faith, we talked about this in the last video we did. Without faith, you can't do anything. It's just going to appear as wood or bone or whatever it is. It's faith that energizes it. It's our faith. And Saint Nectarios used to emphasize himself, when you pray, when a person prays, they have to pray with faith and with their heart engaged. The heart has to believe what the person is praying. And if this happens, miracles can take place. I mentioned some of them before. With the eyes of faith, we can look into the other world. A world which never ends. And I'll add to that there are things that are impossible or difficult for us as human beings. But there's nothing impossible for God. God has more than enough grace. He has more than enough power, in abundance, a superabundance, to pour it out on all of us and on the whole world and solve all of our problems and the problems of everyone else that we know and that are around us and part of our lives. He can solve all the world's problems. He can heal it in one moment. The problem, as I said again, to quote St. Paisios the Athonite, is our lack of faith. Nothing is impossible, St. Paisios says, for God or a saint. The problem for us people is our lack of faith. And because of our material side and the lack of our faith, God's energies are obstructed. And it's part of our human nature is that we get weighed down and we have doubts. But if a person has enough faith, even just a little bit, and they cry out to God, God will answer them. And he'll answer them sometimes through the intercessions of a holy person, through a relic. I want to just say one thing, and then maybe I'll come back and we can talk about the shrine. But just to conclude, I would just want to say this. If anybody has a problem in their life, who's watching this, if anybody has a health problem, someone you love is sick, if they have a serious illness themselves, if they have doubts, if they have a problem that they can't overcome, that's not within their power to fix, to solve, I would encourage them to come to Saint Nectarios' relic here. And if they don't live in Southern California, they can pray to Saint Nectarios on their own, wherever they are, and ask him to help them with their problem. He does hundreds and thousands of miracles. You can find an answer to whatever it is your problem is if you pray. Prayer is the answer to all of our problems. Faith and prayer. Through prayer we become invincible. Through faith we become invincible. As an example, if a person is trying to figure out if the Orthodox Church is the true church, they can pray to Saint Nectarios and they can ask him to show him, show her, to show them. And I fully am convinced that if they do that, they will receive an answer. It depends on us. I don't want to transition too much from that because that was really the heart of what I wanted to say there, but a few other pieces of information to those who are watching the video. This relic, which is behind me here, of the Holy Saint Nectarios, came to this church in 1979. And it's one of a number of Saint Nectarios churches throughout the U.S. and the Greek Archdiocese that I know. Maybe there's more in other jurisdictions, I'm not sure. I am aware also of Saint Nectarios Church, where I was just a few months ago giving some talks in Charlotte, North Carolina. A beautiful church building, beautiful community. And they also have a smaller piece than this of Saint Nectarios' relics there. I am also aware of that in my own experience of having visited Saint Nectarios Monastery in Roscoe, New York, a men's monastery. And I believe that they have a relic there, but I'm not sure. It's been a long time since I've been there. That monastery is dedicated to Saint Nectarios, and they have miracles associated with things that happen there as well. And of course, if somebody wants to really make a pilgrimage, if somebody's has cancer and they feel like they don't have hope, I would say not only can you go to those places that have relics of Saint Nectarios or are associated with him, you can also go to Egina, take a trip to Greece, make a pilgrimage, make some sacrifice, to spend the money, spend the time, and go there and pray. And I'm sure that if you act on faith, you will not be disappointed. The thing that really inspires me about Saint Nectarios is that seeing the holiness that pours out of his relics, seeing the miracles that he performs through his faith and his prayers now, and the healings that take place, and how he's touched so many lives, thousands and thousands of people, is a reminder to me what's possible as a Christian. What is possible if we give ourselves over to holiness, to prayer, and we really have faith in God? When he was alive, he went through tremendous difficulties. He was persecuted. He wasn't well known. He wasn't a dynamic, loud person. He was very quiet. I was listening to a talk about him, and they said, Saint Nectarios, whenever things happened to him, he didn't say much. One of my favorite scenes in the movie that depicts this is that it was slandered. It was one of the ways he was slandered is that he started a convent, and a young girl went there, and her mother was not happy about him joining his convent, her joining his convent. And so she went to the authorities and she lied, and she said, he's having sexual relations with the nuns, and they're having babies and they're aborting them and burying them in the monastery. And the police, and this is depicted in the movie, they go to the monastery and they start throwing the beds up, and they punch Saint Nick to grab one. This actually happened. Somebody grabbed him. They punch him, they knock him down, and he's sitting there quietly. And then the nun runs up to him and she says, "Father, I don't understand. Why don't you say something? It's such a beautiful response from this saint. He doesn't say a word. As they're ransacking the monastery, this is totally false. It's all false accusations. All he does is this. God is watching. God is watching. And he lived his life as if everything that happened to him was as if it came from the hand of God. And this silent, humble faith, again, someone could look at him and see him and they could say, well, he wears dirty robes and he's just this old man. That's looking at him from a human point of view. Someone could see his faith, well, then they would see something very different. They would see someone who's glorified, who's done miracles. And we have to say that out of all the saints that have lived, again, Saint Nectarios has been glorified beyond many of them with the miracles that he's done. This is not an accident. God knows what's going on inside the depths of each one of our hearts and souls, and he saw something in Nektarios. He knows what was there, that he has decided to glorify him and to make him the wellspring of miracles and cures. There's a reason Saint Nectarios is able to do all these things that he does now that he's been glorified. I've seen so many relics in my life, and some of them are more memorable than others, depending. Some of them, I saw the skull of the Apostle Thomas in the monastery on Patmos. I've seen the chains that St. John the theologian wore when he was on Patmos, when he had the vision of the revelation. I've seen the belt of the Virgin Mary. I've seen the numerous parts of the Apostle Andrew and St. John the Baptist. I was blessed with the hand of St. John the Baptist once when I went to one of the monasteries on Mount Athos. I've seen pieces of the true cross. One of the most incredible relics, by the way, is held by the monastery of Simona Petra on Mount Athos, and they have a piece of, it may be the whole thing, I don't know, it's in a case, a thiki we call it in Greek. It's the hand of Saint Mary Magdalene, and they have her skin is exposed so you can kiss it, and when you kiss it, it's not only her hand, but it's warm to the touch, and it's moist after 2,000 years. And they say that the reason why this is the case is because she, at the time when Christ was on the cross, she put her hand on his foot. She reached out and touched his foot. And because of that, her hand is incorrupt and it's almost alive. It's almost alive still. It's an incredible relic. And I felt the warmth when I kissed it. It's just in this metal box, this little piece of skin there. You kiss it and you could feel it's like kissing a living person. Saint Demetrius' relics, of course, gush myrrh in Thessaloniki, and if you go into that church, you can immediately smell it. Sometimes I remember the first time I was there, I think it was 2009 for his feast day, and I came out of this apartment. I was living 2 blocks down from the church, and they had the church open, and it was just this gust of myrrh that was blowing out of the church and down the street, down the highway, the alleyway. 2 blocks down, I could smell it. It hit me like a wave when I came around the corner. From inside the church, out the church, 2 blocks down, just this wave of myrrh, the smell. I've had icons, especially of the Virgin Mary, the Theotokos, that I've kissed, and there's aroma, this myrrh, the sweet smell coming from them. To me, all this just is a reminder that I want to be close to holiness, and I seek those things out, and I seek the help of not only Christ, but Christ in the great cloud of witnesses, his saints. And I want to get close to those people and those things that are going to communicate to me the grace of God as well, and to sanctify me as well. Sometimes when a person just knows another holy person, they can benefit from that person's prayers just because they're a relative or a friend. And they just say, pray for me, and think miracles happen in that person's life. And they're not even doing anything. They just happen to know the holy person. This is how we should treat relics. Holy things are exceptions in this world. And when God gives them and the saints give them, it's out of their love to help us, to comfort us. I love I can even smell it right now on camera. Or on camera, I could smell that aroma that coming from this relic behind me. It's unmistakable. It's the scent of holiness, the scent of the other world. And we could say that if somebody wants an explanation of this, we could say that the saints' relics are sometimes incorrupt, or they have this fragrance because they have achieved a state where their bodies are no longer under the dominion of death and corruption. To some degree, they're anticipating the resurrection and the life of the age to come. And so even in their bodies after hundreds and thousands of years, the corruption does not have complete control over their bodies. There's something about them that God says, no, these people are mine, and I will resurrect them on the last day. We believe in a bodily resurrection, and so we also believe in the incarnation of Christ, the God-man, in the flesh, and we believe in the relics of the saints and other holy objects to communicate God's grace to us. This is something that's very important to our theology. As an example of this, one thing I didn't mention in the last talk, I'll go ahead and plug it here, is that I mentioned the story about how Saint Nectarios was slandered, and the authorities came in the movie. It doesn't depict this, but the story says that one of the people who believed the slander and came there grabbed the saint in the arm and roughed him up a little bit. He was pushing him or pulling him. I don't know what he was doing. He harmed him in some way physically. And the story says that sometime after that person who touched the saint ended up having a problem with the arm that they touched the saint, and they lost it. And the family of that person wrote to Saint Nectarios afterwards, and they said, please forgive him. After this all became obvious that it was wrong, it was slander, it wasn't true. And Saint Nectarios says, I've forgiven him already. I'm already praying for him. But it was God's will that a person be punished for the injustice that he did. We have to be very careful, and material objects can affect us. Just as in the Old Testament, there's a story about how the Israelites were carrying the ark, and it started to slide, and they went there to catch it, and as soon as the person touched it, he dropped dead. These things happen. Their holiness is real. We have to remember that everything our church teaches, everything Christianity teaches, is absolutely real. And the stories that I told today, earlier in our interview, about people with cancer and these ailments, I wanted there to specify the illnesses they had so that people would watch this video, know that I talked to real people. These are real people that had real medical conditions. I didn't make this up. These are not just stories that I heard from somebody. I met these people here, and they really had these miracles happen to them. Those were specific medical conditions that they were healed from. Everything in our church is absolutely real, and we have to have the faith to believe that God and his saints can help us tremendously if we turn to them with faith and love, and we ask for their help, and we invite them into our lives. God can do anything.